How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today we're talking about three of my favorite neighborhoods in all of Denver: the Highlands, Sloans Lake, and Edgewater, and we're starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Everett. And listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons for moving to or around Denver, Colorado, then this is the channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon on your screen, make sure you click on that as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I try to be a little creative here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of Denver's most talented realtors. So the number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person answering your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails, there when and if you need me. Now that we have that fun-filled stuff out of the way, let's get to what we're here for, and that is exploring the Highlands, Sloans Lake, and Edgewater. So as I mentioned in the very beginning, these are three of my absolute favorite neighborhoods in all of Denver, and I want to make sure I emphasize this. We're not talking about cities, we're not talking about towns. In actuality, two of them, Highlands and Sloans Lake, are both neighborhoods and regions. Edgewater is a town, but we're talking about a town that is literally less than 1 square mile. So first we have the Highlands. Overall, I would say my favorite neighborhood in all of Denver. So just as you reach the western side of downtown Denver, you reach Commons Park, a very cool park leading up to the South Platte River. And then you're eventually going to get to I-25, our major north-south, south-north, I do this every time, highway. There is a bridge, the Highlands Bridge, that will take you from Commons Park over the highway. And basically, as soon as you drop over I-25 from that region, you are in the Highlands. Some people will call it Highland, some people will call it the Highlands, and locals will call it North Denver, because at the end of the day, if you're from Denver, that's what you always called it until at some point they decided to call it the Highlands. So the Highlands is divided into two areas. You have the Highlands, could be now 3 areas. You have the Highlands and West Highland, and more recently, the area of the Highlands closest to Denver is now called Low-High or Lower Highlands. Denver all of a sudden started feeling itself, started naming these little regions. It's like every few blocks you go, you're in a new part of a neighborhood, but those are, we'll call it your 2 or 3 sections of the Highlands. Why is it so popular? Well, for a number of factors. First and foremost, to me, it is the perfect blend of suburb and urban living. You still have the amenities of a city. You're still close to a lot of restaurants and shops and boutiques, a ton of walkability. And yet within these neighborhoods, you've got an abundance of different housing options, a lot of detached homes, townhomes. You've got old Victorians that have been around for decades, if not over a century. And then you've got scrapes and new builds and amazing new construction. So just a variety of living with all of the amenities that you need for a city without being in the heart of the city. So the Highlands gets major scores for its walkability. And even though it's got pretty good size to it, it runs all the way from, again, that I-25 called Central Boulevard, all the way over to Sheridan to its west. So within that, you have different pockets of where all these restaurants and different bars, coffee shops are founded. So when we talk about Low-High, which is, again, closest to I-25, you're gonna see places like Recess, Pastino's. There's a great sushi place over there, several sushi places, I should say. Down a little farther, you've got places like Avanti's, which has, in my opinion, one of the best views of all of Denver out on their balcony, and right across the street from them, Happy Camper. So a number of hot spots that people will really come to, not just from the Highlands, but they will drive to the Highlands to visit these locations. And mixed in between all of these are these homes and these townhomes that we're talking about. So you've got all these amenities to live in and all these different variations of homes intermixed with, walking distance to all of these places. That is also one of the reasons that the Highlands tends to be one of the more pricier places to live in Denver. You're paying for that premium because you are minutes away from Denver if you want to be there. You're in an area where, as we're going to talk about, all of these 3 locations are pretty easy to then get on a highway and head up into the mountains. You're already on the west side of Denver as is, and then you're in a community where you don't have to go very far to get any of the things you want. So we talk about that low-high region, and while I'm talking about it, I can't forget to mention Little Man Ice Cream, which is one of the most classic ice cream stands you're ever going to see, and it's got this huge milk canister that symbolizes Denver in so many ways right there. Anybody going to low-high is going to want to check that out. And then you can continue heading farther west in the Highlands. You'll get to another great neighborhood that I enjoy, which is right on 32nd Avenue and Lowell Boulevard, where there's another strip of bars, restaurants, coffee shops, bookstores. Probably, to me, one of the most walkable areas in all of the Highlands. It's also home to Sweet Cow. Clearly, I've got an ice cream thing, and if you have some Little Man and some Sweet Cow, you want to talk about a rivalry. That's like Rocky and Apollo Creed. I know I'm aging myself right now, but it's like that. Although, a side note very quickly, Sweet Cow just dropped their oatmeal cookie ice cream, and I'm pretty devastated right now. I just need to share that with you. And I cannot mention the Highlands without also mentioning the Tennyson corridor. So basically from 38th Avenue all the way over to 44th, 46th is a strip of, again, talk about restaurants and bars and shops and barber shops, along with a ton of really cool townhomes along that strip. Great places to look at living. And you have kind of a variety there just off that corridor of Tennyson, where you've got a lot of detached homes. Now the Highlands, when we talk about these 3 regions, the Highlands above all may have the highest cost overall, but they will also offer the most amenities as far as, or I should say, living options. So you're looking at a lot of detached homes, a lot of townhomes, some apartments, but there will be options to buy and rent within that in those variety of living options. And it's also alive all the time. What do I mean by that? I mean that whether you are getting up early in the morning, you want to go grab some breakfast or have some brunch. You want to go to a farmer's market. That 32nd and Lowell corridor has a great farmer's market during the summer. You want to get out at night, go have some drinks, or maybe go to a show or have some nice dinner. The Highlands is going to allow you to do all of those things throughout the day, any day of the week, all the time. There is always, at least in my opinion, and those that live here, always something to do in the Highlands. Now, some of the drawback, and realistically, you're going to see this in all 3 of these communities, they're close to Denver. So some of the drawbacks, if you're talking about safety, if you're talking about crime, you're talking about homeless, the closer you get to population density, the more those things are going to become, I don't want to say an issue necessarily. The Highlands is popular for a reason, and it's not because it's the most dangerous place to live, but it is something that's going to be more concerning the more dense the population and the closer you get to the city. That's something you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, moving a little west and a tad south from the Highlands, we get to Sloans Lake. Now, Sloans Lake was a place that I called home for the better part or more than a decade. I came back to Colorado in 2008, bought a place in Sloans Lake in 2010 and lived there until 2020 when my bride and I moved farther into Lakewood. But Sloans Lake is kind of that middle ground between leaving the Highlands, leaving Denver, getting a bit more suburb, but not quite getting into the suburbs, if you will. So Sloans Lake has an interesting history to it because it originally did not exist. I mentioned it's not a very big lake, but in 1861, a farmer named Thomas Sloan was digging out this well, cracked into it, and flooded acres and acres of land. And then the city eventually came in, dug a bit more, and the lake was formed. But up until that point, it didn't exist. And Sloans Lake was also home to Manhattan Beach, which in its day was the largest amusement park west of the Mississippi. Had a huge history to it. Sloans Lake is home to the largest body of water. It's not that big, it's about 2.5 miles around, but the largest body of water anywhere near Denver, and one of the most scenic places that you're going to find truly in all of Denver, because from one side of the lake you look across the water and look into the gorgeous Rocky Mountains, and from the other side of the lake you look across the lake and you see all of downtown Denver. I have a rooftop in Sloans Lake in which I've got a straight shot of downtown. It's one of the greatest scenes that you will see. Now, I would say that Sloans Lake relies on the Highlands, and we'll talk about how it relies on Edgewater as well, for a lot of its amenities. You have some great houses and townhomes in Sloans Lake, not a lot of apartments, not a lot of condos in this neighborhood, although we're gonna talk about an area that does have that and does have your rentals for you. But there's not just a ton to do in Sloans Lake itself. The prime hub of that is going to be the lake. Getting outside, walking, running the lake, what have you, picnics, volleyball, softball. Anytime there is sun out, heck, half the time when there's not, Sloans Lake is going to be packed with people. It's also a great lake to go out and paddleboard. They will allow motors on the lake, so you will occasionally see people out on a boat, water skiing and what have you. But I wouldn't necessarily bank on coming to Colorado and taking your boat out there. I think most people with a decent boat are gonna go to bigger water for that, but Sloans Lake is definitely a huge draw. Now, as far as housing issues, housing options, I should say, not issues, Sloans Lake has some amazing detached home properties and certainly some duplexes, quads, townhomes, slot homes where you have, a row of homes, call it townhomes, but they're not all facing the street. They have a variety of those and some truly impressive structures, more impressive than the one I bought. But also, when I was talking about apartments and rentals, along 17th Avenue, which is basically the border of Sloans Lake, it runs right along Sloans. There used to be a hospital there called St. Anthony's. That's now farther into Lakewood. But that entire area was then knocked down and rebuilt into kind of the hub of what Sloans Lake offers. So within this, you have a ton of townhomes, apartments, condos. You've got some very impressive structures, including the Lake House, which is one of the most prestigious places to live in all of Denver at this point. A few years ago, the penthouse went for $3 million or $3,000 per square foot, which was a record for Denver. I don't know what it's worth now. Hasn't been for sale in a while, but an extremely impressive building. Within that community, there are also a handful of restaurants. Vato's Tacos, pretty brand new and delicious. Sloan's Tap and Burger. You also have an Alamo Draft House, which is one of those movie theaters where you can kick back, have people bring you drinks and food while you watch a movie. That's pretty awesome. And so for Sloans Lake, that is kind of their closest hub if they're not trying to leave that area, as they'll head over to that St. Joseph's corridor, if you will. So there's not nearly as much to talk about when it comes to Sloans Lake as there is the Highlands, just because the Highlands has so much going for it, but you're conveniently located within minutes of the Highlands. So when I lived in Sloans Lake, it was routine that if we wanted to do something, we would go to the Highlands. It's a 5 to 10 minute drive tops, or we'd bounce over to Edgewater, which we're going to talk about next. And as much as I tell you that the Highlands are my favorite neighborhood, my dream, if I ever make millions upon millions of dollars, maybe unlikely, would be to buy a house that looks on Sloans Lake. Some of the houses that wrap that lake are just the coolest places with the coolest views, really well thought out, where you can just tell, obviously, if you're gonna live next to a house that has mountain and city views as well, you're gonna have the ability to see all of them from these different decks and these different observation areas. Very impressive. And last, all you got to do from Sloans Lake is bounce over one more street from Sheridan over into what we now call Edgewater. So Edgewater, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, the Highlands, Sloans Lake, those are both neighborhoods. They both have Denver addresses. But as you get into Edgewater, that's the first time that the address changes from Denver to actually Edgewater. Edgewater measures 445 acres. 445 acres is how big Edgewater is if you ask Google how big it is. 445 acres is roughly 0.69 square miles. So not even one full square mile of town. But within it, it's got a lot of heart, a lot of spirit. And so Edgewater is home to a variety. Obviously you've got a handful of homes and townhomes, different places to live. You're right by Sloans Lake. It's called Edgewater because it was on the edge of the water. Within that, you also have a couple really cool things. So along 20th Avenue, which is right in the middle of the lake, heading west, up 20th Avenue is a place called Edgewater Public Market. This huge area filled with shops, stores, boutiques that you can go shop at, coffee shops, ice cream again, every time I mention ice cream, and also a variety of different food centers. So think about like a really upscale food court in which the food is outstanding and you want to go. It also has a very cool bar within it. There's places to work out. There's a crumble cookie in case you want more sweets. As you can tell, I kind of dig sweets. So a lot going for it in Edgewater Public Market. I was a little butthurt when they built that public market because they finally completed this thing. We had been waiting for this building to turn into something for 10 years, and maybe 7 months before I moved is when they finally opened it. So Edgewater, I appreciate you, but that was kind of a jerk move. And then a very cool corridor, again, coming up the north side of Sloans Lake. I had to think about that for a second. You go up 25th Avenue, just on the other side of Sheridan, and you have the nice Welcome to Edgewater banner going over the top. And you've got a few really great spots, including Joyride Brewery, which is right on the corner, and then Providence Tavern just a block up to the left. Edgewater Inn. Denver is not a big pizza town, but Edgewater Inn on 25th has some of the best pie you'll find in Denver. So the mascot of Joyride Brewery is Roger the Elephant. And Roger the Elephant was an elephant at Manhattan Beach, the amusement park I told you about earlier in Sloans Lake. And in a tragic accident, Roger the Elephant was spooked and he actually killed a young child. He stomped a young child to death. And so his remains, that led to the park being shut down eventually. They had a huge fire there. It was just a mess. But Roger the Elephant was just this famous creature in Sloans Lake and in that region for this horrible tragedy. I mean, the poor animal gets spooked, poor kid gets killed, terrible. But anything you see of Joyride Brewery has Roger the Elephant, just tying more of that history. And Edgewater, again, named because it was on the edge of the water. So at the end of the day, if you're moving to Denver and you're looking for communities that give you, a city feel, the luxury of being able to get downtown and even from the farthest reaches of Edgewater, all less than a mile of it, to Denver, you're going to be in the city in 10 minutes. You can get from any of them to the mountains, and I'd say from areas of the Highlands, it could be tricky. It could take you 25 minutes. But you have all the amenities. They're all interchangeable. If you live in one, it's very easy to get to the other. You have everything you could possibly need. Someone could truly live in any of these three neighborhoods for years. I did for 10 and very rarely need to leave for anything. Outstanding neighborhoods, definitely places to explore. And this is part of my fun because I love hearing the stories of people visiting. So if you want to talk Highlands, Sloans Lake, Edgewater, you want to talk about North Denver, we can do it. That's what I'm here for. This is Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everett. That was living in the Highlands, Sloans Lake, Edgewater. Until I see you next time, peace.